Welcome to my studio tete-a-tete on Diaspora UA. I'm Oksana Davida, and my guest today, Mr. Glen Grant, defense security expert and military expert from Baltic Security Foundation from United Kingdom. Good evening, sir.
Yeah, good evening.
Nice to see you again. Sir, 2 months ago, we were talking with you, and you were so kind to give us your opinion about Russian aggression, which lasts for 9 months already. And in your opinion, what had changed from Western point of view? And do you think finally maybe USA, NATO have much better understanding of themselves, of Russia, of Ukraine, and of all that situation with that bloody war? Do you think something changed?
Well, there's big questions there, big questions. Let's start with that, try and unpack the Russia bit first. Obviously, a lot has changed in Russia because they were struggling to find enough people, so they had to go for mobilization. And even with mobilization and just throwing people at the front line, untrained people, poorly equipped, and I mean, even joking equipment. I mean, today on Facebook, someone was actually showing that one of the Russian soldiers had a helmet on, and when he'd been killed, inside the helmet it said, "This is a toy. This is not to be used for." As a proper helmet. So I mean, there's sort of things like that that are just bizarre to the point of almost unbelievableness, but they are believable and they are true. So these guys are coming to the front line and they've been a mess. And of course, the thing about it is as the weather's got worse and worse and worse, then some morale has slipped away, and gradually people are seeing that in the Russian side that they're losing their friends in big numbers, and they're beginning to write home to mum and actually say, look, this is a mess. We need to run away. We need to do something or whatever. The strange thing is that there appears to be no understanding in Russia about how bad it is. In fact, it's almost the reverse, that the mothers are actually saying, don't be a wimp. You stay there and die. Sort of logic, showing absolutely no concern no love whatsoever for the people that have gone to the front line. They're just happy that they get a larder if the husband dies or son dies or whatever. They don't seem at all concerned about the human aspects of this, and nor do the and nor do the Russian staff and the Russian officers. And in many cases, the Russian officers are just pushing these people to the front and then staying behind, 2 villages back out of artillery range themselves, and drinking and getting drunk. So it's the Russian side is a mess. I mean, what they have on their side still is a huge amount of artillery and still apparently quite a lot of ammunition, although the ammunition is dropping. The percentages are coming down steadily. And there are increasing gaps between the firing and much less where they'd have fired 500,000 rounds before. Now they're firing 30. So it is dropping. And that's primarily because the Ukrainians are attacking the command posts and attacking the ammunition dumps behind with their artillery and rocket launchers. Now we know that, that the Russians pull back out of Kherson. And the major argument appears to be that if they'd left the soldiers to fight in Kherson, that there would have been, mass surrenders and a complete disaster, that they wouldn't have fought. And that would have then meant that Russia did not have those soldiers, and there were quite a lot of them, because they'd have given up. So they pulled them back over the river to defensive positions on the other side of the Dnieper. But the war still goes on, and the war still goes on because they're firing artillery along the whole front every day, but they're not firing necessarily at Ukrainians. They're firing at villages. They're trying to trash everything that is, human about Ukraine. So buildings, they're firing at schools, they're firing at anything to do with power utilities, and just generally building blocks where people might be living. and they're still fighting. They're still trying to attack in this area about from 50 to 100 kilometers north of Donetsk on the old, what used to be called the ATO, anti-terrorist organization front line, where the trench lines are. And they're still attacking quite a lot in those areas, which is really quite strange. And someone asked me today, actually, why are they attacking there? And the only thing I can come up with is Putin said so. You know, that's got to be something like that, or because if they're trying to take over the Donetsk area, then the last thing you want to do really is to start pushing in places where Ukraine is clearly defending well. That makes no logic, unless, of course, what they're trying to do is just tie down as many Ukrainian soldiers as possible so that they don't get attacked themselves somewhere else. Goodness knows. But anyway, the war continues. What's going to happen next with Russian forces? Well, morale is particularly low. And in many places, it's worse than low, because in the freezing weather, soldiers are actually literally dying in trenches of hypothermia because they're not properly equipped. They've got no winter clothing in most cases. The exception seems to be that the Wagner group, who appear to have got money and spent money on the people that they've got, so that they're better equipped. But of course, the Wagner group, a lot of them are now ex-prisoners. And ex-prisoners do not make good soldiers necessarily. And some of them are slipping away. So they're actually sort of capturing them and killing them when they slip away, which is not a good way of enthusing people to fight for your country. So there we have that. Moving to the US and NATO, and do they understand the Russian side? No. I see no evidence that either NATO or US really understands what they're dealing with. And do they understand themselves better? I'm not sure of that either. I'm certainly within NATO. I really don't believe they understand how to deal with the complexity of the NATO organization. And there doesn't appear to be an understanding in either NATO or US of what it means to have deterrence. And actually, how do you deter Russia? Because the only thing that deters Russia is real strength, is hard, nasty strength. That deters them. And if you show signs of weakness, as, for example, Blinken did by suggesting, well, we will support Ukraine until they get to the line for the 24th of February, and after that it's up to them. That immediately gives a green light to Putin, because he says, if I can hang on, then it looks as though America's not going to support them for attacking Crimea or attacking Donetsk or somewhere else. And it's that sort of verbal weakness that is immediately seized upon by the other side as showing that there isn't true deterrent strength in NATO and the US. So we've still got some thinking to do about actually how to deal with Russia as it is at the moment, in my view.
Because listening to Stoltenberg and some other officials from White House, like you mentioned, Blinken, it's kind of even not easy to understand how such a organization, let's say, like NATO, for example, they don't have any strategy, even today. I can assume they did not have any real strategy in the beginning, because they were ready for what, few days or 1 week, and half of Ukraine is going to be under Russia. This is how I see. But after 9 months, baby could be born. They still don't have any strategy, and they actually openly saying that. And when you listen to those officials, yes, like you said, 3-minute speech, and 7 or 8 times they say, we will support Ukraine. By what? By putting colors on their building, or just saying we support you? It's just blah, 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 words, no action. Why? Why they don't do that? And another fear they have, what to do with Russia? They didn't have enough time to even learn or just educate themselves? What's going on? Why?
That's complex questions. I mean, I think NATO has a strategy is to not do anything to aggravate Russia. That's the strategy. So in other words, we'll do things, but we don't want to do anything that makes them cross in case the war gets worse. But of course, the problem is that again, that is a green light to Putin, who says, hey, these guys are cowards. I can afford to do worse things now with Ukraine because they're never going to come in and defend Ukraine properly. So he is expanding his war. I mean, he's digging in for a long war, and increasing the relationships with Iran and North Korea and and almost certainly China behind our backs. And he will now be trying to get back from the world all that equipment that they've sold to people in the past. And there is a lot of it in Africa. So he'll try and buy back those tanks. He'll try and buy back those multi-barrel rocket launchers that are in African countries. And I don't know what he'll pay, oil, I suppose, oil and gas, but he'll have to pay for them up front. But he'll do that as best that he can. Now he's in for a long war, and I don't think that NATO grasps what the long war means. So you're hearing people saying, well, countries are running out of their equipment, their spare equipment and everything else. But I don't see any sign in Europe that, apart from Poland and arguably the Baltic states, Finland and Sweden, in other words, those people who are closest, I don't see that the others are actually taking any action of any strength that suggests they understand that this could be a real war for them, not just for Ukraine. America's got the buffer. It's got the buffer of the sea, and it doesn't really taste the war.
Yeah.
The war is at arm's length still for America. And not only that, I suspect with all the things that are going on internally in US, with all the, I'm going to say, the Trumpisms and still January 6th still not settled, that the White House gives probably 10 minutes a day to Ukraine. And then it's, okay, yeah, let's do that. But there's not any real depth thinking about how to win this war. You can hear that from Miley. I mean, Miley's, he's the boss, the military boss. I've not heard a single thing from him from the beginning that shows he grasps about how to win this war. On the contrary, it's the other way around. He's acting like a fey politician of, let's get this stopped, let's sort this out in other ways, let's have negotiations. Well, that's not what someone of his status should be doing for dealing with a European war. We got to win this. And I don't sense that solidness. I do in UK to a degree, which is slightly outside of the others, and the stubbornness of UK is still there. But then it's being left at as I said, Sweden, Finland, Baltic states, Poland, Czech Republic, because they remember what it was like being in the Soviet Union. Still, they were invaded themselves. They lost lots of people. But bizarre, Hungary, which was also invaded, is supporting Russia. I mean,
yeah.
Where's the logic?
Exactly. And we all conservative Americans, especially Ukrainian Americans, we non-stop criticizing White House and President Biden because we see he's not helping enough. He doesn't understand situation. He doesn't have strategy. He can, but he doesn't want Ukraine to win fast. We have so many examples, but latest one, what do you think about that secret decision or order to secretly alter HIMARSes? And that word secretly, it's the most annoying, because how you can do such a thing to prevent Ukrainians firing on supposedly Russian territory secretly. So our guys are ready to do their job, and oh my God, 1 second they realize it's not going to do that job. So it's okay to bomb Ukrainian territory, Ukrainian cities, civilians, but it's not okay to even think about firing back at, for example, military base. This is just disgusting. It's terrible.
I find it bizarre, and it's. I think it's a symptom of having people in the White House and other advisors who've never been to war, and who don't understand, understand that a country like Russia can be so evil. It's beyond their comprehension. That so many, the whole thing that they just don't care about raping children and trashing the environment and murdering people with a bullet to the head and things like this. And what I find saddest about this is that we hear constantly about the Holocaust and genocide, and we hear those great words, never again. And here it is happening again, and people are sitting back and letting it happen. We've allowed Putin to set the public relations agenda by talking about nuclear. Well, we haven't talked about nuclear much on our side. Perhaps we should have done, loudly and clearly. This is what Miley should say, mate. You touch that button and you're toast, all of you, because we know that actually 70% of your nuclear missiles are unusable. Because they're in the same rotten state that an awful lot of the armored vehicles and things were. The money's been stolen from the repair and it's gone elsewhere. So they know they're not in a condition to do anything clever. I mean, look at Putin previously, before the war, before the major part of the war, talking about their hypersonic missile that's going to go all the way from Russia to America in 3 nanoseconds. Excuse me, where is it? It's just a bluff. And their new tank, where is it? Doesn't exist. It's dead on its feet. So there's all these wondrous things that people have been worrying about, and they don't exist. It's a hollow, it's a completely hollow country, and we're giving it time to sort itself out, which is not very sensible at all. It isn't sensible.
Yeah. And I just got one example recently through some news, which tells us how full world is looking at war in Ukraine. It was actually shocking to me because it's about Apple company. They declined offer of Deep State, that famous map site, which we can use to see what's going on the front line, which I think very useful, very precise, and it's used by many people, even like journalists and military people. So that Deep State map, they call, in some probably leftist people in Apple, they call it racist map. So how they can find something racist in map of a real war, which is erasing half of country in the middle of Europe in 21st century. So it just gives us that, like you said, people, of course, in California, in Silicon Valley, they don't have idea what it means war. They don't want even to understand. And even having that mobile app on their Apple store, they think it's racist because of what? You think they protect Russia, or they just don't want to be involved? Or what can be racist in that terrible bloody war on territory of Ukraine? So
you've got to understand that in places like Silicon Valley, there are quite a lot of Russian computer people, and there are also Indian computer people, and India has been very, very neutral in this whole thing so far. So it's not as though this is both the strength and the weakness of the United States of America, that you get all the best from all over the world to come and work there, but then they also bring their cultures with them. And at times like this, those cultures get drawn to the top. And you actually see that, people are all right and they're all nice when you're talking about football. But when you're talking about war in your own country or in a neighboring country, then people start to show what their real values are. And that's a challenge. That's a challenge. But that's a challenge that frankly needs strong leadership from the top in US. Because if you don't have strong leadership from the top, then you're just a mass of competing cultures. And that at a time like this, that's not necessarily a good thing. Although I have to say that when I go on LinkedIn and Facebook, that the support from the body of United States of America has been huge. From
Yeah.
Mr. and Mrs. Joe Average, it's been huge, and very, very positive and very, very, very straightforward in support. So it's not it's not the majority of Americans. The majority of Americans clearly want Ukraine to win, and for all the right, honest reasons, which is good. But this is a difficult time. It's a difficult time, it's a difficult time when you've got people that really are frightened of the whole thing. So today I was just writing to someone on Facebook, quite a long chat about Zelensky, and I said that he's supposed to be speaking to the European Union in a couple of days' time in Strasbourg, and I said he should travel and go there. And immediately someone came on and said, "Oh no, you can't. He'll be at great risk." And I said the only risk for him going to Strasbourg is the bad driving in the snow. Because, there is no other risk. Russia is not going to be able to put together a hit team to go to Strasbourg and take out Zelensky. Apart from the fact he's got more bodyguards than you can shake a stick at. But it's just that sort of lack of understanding of the world. And then we went into the conversation and I pointed out that, during World War II, Churchill traveled all over the place. Churchill came and spent the whole of Christmas month with Roosevelt. A month with Roosevelt, talking to him about the war and planning and deciding what they were going to do and how they were going to do and what they were going to do next and everything else. And Churchill also flew, to meet Stalin. That flight all the way down across the North Africa and huge risk on the flight, but he still went. And he flew to Murmansk to see Churchill. Huge risk. So, that people have forgotten, I think, that this sort of thing, and maybe forgotten how to win a war.
Sir, and my last, not even a question, just like a hint. I don't like to ask about opinion, about future, about prediction, because, nobody really knows. We don't have real Nostradamus. But with your experience, with your expertise, just share your thoughts, what you're going to imagine for Ukraine, maybe a couple months, maybe end of this year, how it will look. Maybe something will change here in January in the United States. Maybe that will influence Ukrainian war. So just your vision, not prediction, just vision.
I think that the war is going to get more bloody. I don't think it's going to get less bloody, and I think that the attacks on Ukraine are going to continue in the same way, because Putin is basically saying he's going to, and his general is a killer general, so he'll want to do what he can. I don't see it expanding outside of Ukraine still for a while. I think it stays inside Ukraine, and then you have to say that the strength of the war on the Ukraine side does depend upon support from European Union and US and UK, no question about it. And it's how much energy those leaders put in. I sense greater strength coming from some of them. You might say from strange places like Sweden, who are actually beginning to realize that this is serious, I mean, we've still got, the nonsense of Macron and the nonsense of Scholz. And Scholz, okay, Scholz is giving stuff, but it is nowhere near what one would expect from a country the size and wealth of Germany. Nowhere near it, compared to, little Latvia, which has given effectively 50% of its defense budget to Ukraine. So, they really have pushed everything that they can in Ukraine's direction. But I mean, the big question is how long Russia can continue to lie to itself, and at what stage? What is it that are they all going to just lie to themselves to death, or will there actually be a tipping point where that suddenly starts to change things? That tipping point could be if Putin runs away, and then people suddenly say, well, hey, where's the great leader? I mean, he can keep the thing going with his doubles, of whom he probably has at least 2, if not 3. He can keep some sort of game going for a while. The old thing of Stalin's dead sort of thing, but no, here he is. But I just don't know about Russia. I mean, it's impossible to tell how much of this, the speaking and the way they're talking is actually bravado, and how much of it is actually so deep down ingrained in the flock of sheep that is the Russian population that it is impossible to change. And if it's impossible to change, then this war could go on for a long time, because they can just keep taking more and more sheep and throwing them at the front line. In which case, then the support needs to be even bigger, because the amount of people you're fighting against continues to grow and develop. So there's a worry that it might not break. The real thing that will break it is bad winter. If the winter gets really, really cold, and the Russian soldiers start dying in big numbers from no clothing and everything else, and then they break, which is quite possible, and then they break and start going backwards. Nothing will stop it then. Then that'll be the same as Russia was in 1917 on the German front, and 1941. They will break and they will run. And then there's a whole different game for everybody. And I don't know what would happen after that. But broken.
Thank you. We hope to have much better news and more optimistic thoughts very, very soon, because
So.
doesn't matter how it happened, Ukraine will win. Ukraine is winning already. And thank you for your expertise and your thoughts and your opinion. Thank you, sir. It was a pleasure to have you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much to our listeners and our viewers. Oksana Davida, Glen Grant, glory to Ukraine.
Glory to heroes.
Thank you, sir. Good night.
Good night.